When I suspected she was going on a business trip with her lover, she got angry at the truth and complained to a therapist that I was controlling her. So I decided not to be a cuckold, filed for divorce immediately, and kicked her out of my house. Then she had a meltdown in court. My name is Blake, and I'm 26 years old. I had what most people would consider a solid life setup, a good career that I genuinely enjoyed, living downtown in a really nice place that I was proud to call home. For 3 years, I'd been with Jessica, and we'd been living together for almost 2 of those years. 8 months ago, I'd put an engagement ring on her finger, and we were talking about the whole package: marriage, future plans, building a life together. Jessica was truly one of those women who just commanded attention everywhere she went. She worked as a PR director and had these grand, ambitious ideas about media campaigns and client strategies that honestly impressed me. I loved watching her get this fire in her eyes when she talked about work projects. She was so passionate about what she did that she actually made me genuinely care about press coverage metrics, just because her enthusiasm was infectious. We had developed our rhythm down to perfection over those years together. Tuesday morning runs became our tradition, followed by stops at this overpriced hipster coffee place that we both pretended to hate, but secretly loved. We'd spend entire weekends doing Netflix binges, and she had this habit of stealing my hoodies that I'd pretend to be annoyed about. Secretly, though, I absolutely loved it when she wore my clothes. Our conversations would stretch until 2 a.m. regularly, talking about everything and nothing: work stress, random philosophical thoughts, funny things we'd seen during the day, dreams about our future together. We had 3 years of shared history, a life we'd built together, and wedding planning that was starting to get serious. I genuinely thought we were bulletproof as a couple. Then February happened, and everything in our relationship went completely sideways. Every woman seems to have that one friend. You know the type I'm talking about. The chaos agent who shows up every few years like a bad rash, stirs up drama and complications, then vanishes until the next crisis needs orchestrating. For Jessica, that person was Victoria Morrison, spelled with all the drama that name implies. Victoria had been Jessica's college roommate and sorority sister, the wild one who always pushed boundaries and encouraged questionable decisions. Since graduation, she'd been safely contained in Dallas, which honestly felt like a blessing. I was genuinely grateful for that 500-mile buffer zone between Victoria and our peaceful relationship. But in February, Victoria got transferred back to our city for work. Suddenly, my mature adult fiancé seemed to transform back into the sorority girl she'd been in college, complete with all the drama and poor decision-making that apparently came with that territory. "Victoria is back," Jessica announced one evening, practically vibrating with excitement as she burst through our front door. Her eyes had that manic gleam I'd learned to associate with trouble brewing. "Isn't that amazing?" she continued, not waiting for my response. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing some work presentations. "Sure, amazing," I replied, though internally I was thinking, what could possibly go wrong? And guess what? "She's been in touch with Derek too," Jessica said, scrolling through her phone with the kind of manic energy that made me immediately suspicious. "You remember Derek, right?" she asked, glancing up at me with an expression that suggested this was supposed to be exciting news. Derek. Yeah, I remember Derek all right. They'd never actually dated, but he was her college best guy friend. The one whose name came up just often enough in her stories to make me slightly uncomfortable, but never quite enough for me to actually say anything about it without seeming paranoid or controlling. "She wants to get the old gang back together," Jessica continued, her fingers flying across her phone screen. "Isn't that sweet?" Sweet, right? I thought to myself. Because getting the old gang back together has such a stellar track record in relationship history. But like an idiot, I managed to smile and said, "Sure, that sounds great," because I trusted her. I trusted us. I believed in what we'd built together over 3 years. That response turned out to be my first major mistake in this whole situation. My second mistake was not immediately recognizing the red flags that started flying like warning banners immediately after Victoria's return. It all started with something as innocent as a group chat. Jessica showed me her phone excitedly a few days later, explaining that Victoria had created a group chat for all of them. The chat was called College Crew Reunion, exactly as obnoxious and nostalgic as you'd expect from someone trying to recreate their glory days. Victoria was clearly the ringleader of this digital reunion, constantly posting old photos from their college days and sharing inside jokes that I obviously wasn't part of. Derek was dropping comments with just a little too much familiarity for my comfort. responding to everything with an enthusiasm that seemed excessive for casual friendship. Jessica was eating up every message like candy, responding instantly to everything and laughing at jokes I didn't understand. The messages seemed innocent enough at first glance, planning dinners, reminiscing about old professors, sharing memories from their college years. But there was definitely an undertone that I couldn't quite put my finger on, like they were all sharing some secret that I wasn't in on. It felt like there was a whole layer of communication happening that went beyond what I was seeing. My best friend Kyle was the first person to notice the shift in Jessica's behavior. Kyle's this guy I've known since high school. He works in construction management, sharp as hell, and has absolutely zero tolerance for bullshit or manipulation. He's the kind of friend who will tell you hard truths when you need to hear them. "Dude," he said one evening when we were grabbing drinks after work, "your girl's Instagram feed is looking real cozy lately." I knew exactly what he meant, but I asked anyway. "What do you mean?" Kyle pulled out his phone and started scrolling through Jessica's recent posts. He was absolutely right, and I felt stupid for not paying closer attention. Suddenly, Jessica's social media was full of squad pictures. Always her, Victoria, and Derek at various trendy spots around town. Always the three of them, and notably, always without me. When I'd ask Jessica about these outings later, she always had perfectly reasonable individual excuses. "Work ran late and I couldn't wait for you," she'd say. Or, "You were at the gym when they called." Or, "It was just a quick thing, didn't think you'd be interested." Each excuse made perfect sense on its own. But when I started putting them together, they formed a pattern that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Then came March, and with it, Jessica's sudden fitness obsession that seemed to come out of nowhere. Jessica had never been particularly athletic during our entire relationship. She'd go through phases here and there, maybe a month of yoga classes or a brief cycling kick, but nothing ever stuck for more than a few weeks. Her exercise routine was casual at best. Suddenly, in March, she was signing up for this intense CrossFit gym with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found religion. But here's the thing that immediately raised my suspicions. She didn't choose the convenient gym that was literally 5 minutes from our apartment. No, she had to drive 25 minutes across town to this specific gym that just happened to be right near Derek's office. What were the odds of that coincidence? "I want to get in shape for the wedding," she explained one morning, lacing up brand new $180 Nike training shoes that had appeared overnight. Derek recommended this place specifically. He says their trainers are absolutely amazing and that it's the best gym in the city. Of course, Derek recommended it, because everything in Jessica's life was starting to revolve around Derek's opinions and suggestions. It seemed like every conversation somehow circled back to what Derek thought, what Derek recommended, or what Derek had said about various topics. The fitness obsession was immediately followed by shopping sprees that made my credit card statements look like she'd robbed an entire athletic store. Full Lululemon everything. Matching sets, sports bras, leggings, workout tops, athletic shoes, water bottles, gym bags. We're talking about hundreds of dollars in workout gear for someone who had previously been content exercising in old t-shirts and whatever shorts she could find. When I mentioned the expense during one of our monthly budget reviews, she immediately got defensive in a way that was completely unlike her previous attitude about our shared finances. "It's an investment in my health," she said with an edge in her voice that suggested I was being unreasonable. "You should be supportive of me trying to better myself." That was the first time Jessica had ever accused me of not being supportive, and it stung because I'd always tried to encourage her interests and goals. But apparently, questioning the financial wisdom of spending hundreds of dollars on workout clothes made me the bad guy. Then her entire Instagram presence transformed practically overnight. Jessica went from posting normal, relatable content about our life together to full fitness influencer mode. Pre-dawn gym selfies with captions like "earning my Sunday brunch" and "strong is the new sexy" started flooding her feed. The transformation was so dramatic that I barely recognized her online presence. But what really got under my skin were the comments on these posts. Derek was always first to respond with "looking good" and way too many fire emojis for what should have been casual encouragement between friends. His comments had an intimate, flirtatious tone that made me increasingly uncomfortable, especially since Jessica never seemed to discourage this attention. Then came the phone situation, which was perhaps the most telling change of all. Throughout our entire relationship, we'd been completely normal and open about our phones. We'd leave them lying around without a second thought, and if one of us got a text while driving, the other would naturally read it out loud. It was standard relationship behavior built on trust and transparency. Suddenly, Jessica's phone became surgically attached to her hand. It was always face down on tables, always on silent, and always angled away from me when she was texting, which I started noticing was constantly throughout the day and evening. "Just coordinating with the trainer," she'd say whenever I caught her smiling at her screen at 11 p.m., which seemed like an odd time to be discussing workout schedules. Our social life got completely hijacked during this period as well. We went from making plans together as a team, discussing our weekends and deciding what we wanted to do as a couple, to everything starting with phrases like, "the group wants to," or "Victoria suggested," or "Derek knows this great place." I felt like I'd lost my partner in planning our life together. Date nights that we'd planned in advance would get interrupted by urgent group texts that Jessica absolutely had to respond to immediately. Weekend plans we'd made together would get rearranged at the last minute because Victoria had cooked up some spontaneous adventure that couldn't wait. I went from being Jessica's partner to being the guy who tagged along when it was convenient for the group dynamic. Kyle delivered the wake-up call I needed during one of our regular basketball sessions one evening. We were playing one-on-one at the local court, and he'd just nailed a perfect three-pointer when he turned to me with that brutally honest expression I'd learned to both appreciate and dread. "Bro," he said, dribbling the ball casually, "when's the last time you and Jessica did something alone? And I mean actually alone. Not alone until Victoria texted with some emergency that required Jessica's immediate attention." I stopped mid-shot and really thought about his question. I tried to remember the last time Jessica and I had spent an evening together, just the two of us, without her phone buzzing constantly with group chat notifications or sudden changes to our plans, because the college crew had decided they needed to do something spontaneous. I thought about it hard, really digging through my recent memories, and came up completely empty. I couldn't pinpoint a single recent occasion where Jessica's attention had been fully focused on us as a couple rather than divided between me and whatever drama or excitement was happening in that group chat. "That's what I thought," Kyle said, reading my expression perfectly. "She's got a new priority list, and you ain't at the top anymore, my friend." His words hit me like a cold slap of reality. Jessica's entire world had been completely reorganized around this college friend group dynamic, with Victoria serving as puppet master and Derek as the co-star in whatever drama they were all creating together. I'd somehow become a supporting character in my own relationship, relegated to the background while Jessica chased after the excitement of reliving her college glory days. But even with Kyle's harsh reality check echoing in my head, I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, insecure, and clingy. These were all the labels that guys get stuck with when they notice their girlfriends pulling away and express concern about it. I told myself that I was imagining problems where none existed, that I was being the stereotypical jealous boyfriend who couldn't handle his partner having friends. I spent weeks trying to rationalize away my growing discomfort, telling myself that this was just a phase Jessica was going through. She was reconnecting with old friends, trying to recapture some of the fun and freedom of her college years before we settled into married life. It seemed reasonable enough when I framed it that way in my mind. What I didn't realize at the time was that sometimes what people dismiss as paranoia is actually just pattern recognition working exactly the way it's supposed to work. My subconscious had been cataloging all these small changes in Jessica's behavior, and my gut instincts were screaming warnings that I kept trying to rationalize away. The pattern was about to become crystal clear in a way that would make denial impossible, but I wasn't ready to see it yet. I was still operating under the assumption that 3 years of history and an engagement ring meant something significant to Jessica. I believed that our shared life and future plans would outweigh whatever nostalgic appeal her college friends might have. I was about to learn just how wrong I was about where I stood in Jessica's priorities, and the lesson would come in the most humiliating way possible. The whole situation exploded on a Wednesday night in April at the steakhouse that held special meaning for both of us. This was our spot, the place where we'd had our first official date 3 years earlier, where I'd mentally rehearsed proposing about 100 times while trying to work up the courage. I'd chosen this restaurant specifically because I was excited about sharing some potentially life-changing news with her. I'd been working my ass off for months on this major project at work, and everything was finally coming together. I was genuinely excited to tell Jessica about how well things were going and what it could mean for our future together. If my presentation went well the following week, I might be looking at a promotion to senior marketing coordinator by the end of the year. But Jessica was completely distracted throughout dinner, half listening to everything I said while scrolling through what I now know was the group chat. She kept making these little huffing laughs at whatever brilliant commentary was being shared between Victoria and Derek, completely ignoring the important conversation I was trying to have with her. So, if this presentation goes well next week, I said, trying once again to capture her attention, I might be looking at senior marketing coordinator by the end of the year. It would mean a significant salary bump and much better opportunities for advancement. Hmm, she responded absently, still typing away on her phone. That's great, babe. She hadn't heard a single word I'd actually said. That's when her phone buzzed with an incoming call, and Victoria's name lit up the screen. Jessica's whole face immediately changed, like she'd been waiting for this specific call all evening and everything else had just been killing time. I should take this, she said, already standing up from the table before I could respond. She walked outside, and through the restaurant's large front window, I watched her pacing back and forth on the sidewalk. She was gesturing animatedly, clearly engaged in an intense conversation about something that had her completely energized. Whatever Victoria was telling her, it was obviously big news that had Jessica more excited than anything I'd shared with her in months. When she finally came back inside after about 5 minutes, she was practically vibrating with excitement. Her eyes were bright, and she had this manic energy that I'd learned to associate with Victoria's influence on her decision-making. Okay, so you know how Victoria has been planning something special for our reunion? She said, sliding back into her seat. I actually didn't know that Victoria had been planning anything special, but I nodded anyway, figuring this was another detail from the group chat that I hadn't been privy to. Well, she just finalized everything tonight, Jessica continued, barely able to contain her enthusiasm. She booked us a weekend at this amazing resort in Aspen. Isn't that incredible? She paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the part that made my stomach drop. It's going to be us, me, her, and Derek, the core three, just like old times. Just like old times. The core three. I noticed immediately that I wasn't part of this equation, despite being the guy who was supposed to marry her in a few months. And what about me? I asked, trying to keep my voice level and reasonable. She paused like this possibility genuinely hadn't occurred to her when she was getting excited about the trip. Oh, well, it's kind of a college friends thing, you know? You know how it is with inside jokes and shared memories. You'd probably be bored, right? According to my own fiancé, I'd be bored at a romantic lakeside resort weekend with her. Let that sink in for a moment. When is this happening? I asked. Next weekend, she replied. Victoria got this incredible deal, but we have to book now or lose the spot entirely. This was the same weekend that Jessica and I had been talking about driving up to wine country for our own little romantic getaway. Plans that were apparently now being scrapped so she could go to Aspen with Derek instead. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said, working hard to keep my voice calm and level. Victoria planned a weekend trip to a romantic resort for you and Derek, and somehow forgot to include your fiancé in these plans. It's not like that, Jessica said, but I could hear an edge creeping into her voice. Derek is like a brother to me. You know that. Brothers don't usually take their sisters to couples resorts in Aspen, I replied. Stop, she said firmly. It's not a couples resort. It's just a nice place, and Victoria will be there too, so it's not like we're going alone. Victoria, who's been trying to recreate your college glory days since the moment she moved back to town, I said. That comment about Victoria trying to recreate college glory days hit a nerve with Jessica in a way I hadn't expected. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice taking on a defensive tone that I rarely heard from her. It means I'm not comfortable with you going away for the weekend with another guy, regardless of your history together, I said, finally drawing the line I'd been avoiding for months. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that was about to spread out of control. This was it, the boundary I'd been dancing around, the line in the sand that would determine whether our relationship had any real foundation left. Are you freaking serious right now? Jessica said, her voice loud enough that nearby tables started turning to look at us. You're going to be that guy? The controlling boyfriend who doesn't trust his own fiancée? Setting a reasonable boundary isn't being controlling, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. It's called having self-respect. It's called being insecure, she shot back without hesitation. Derek is my friend, my oldest friend. If you can't handle that basic fact, then maybe we have much bigger problems than I thought. Her phone buzzed with a text message at that exact moment. She glanced down at it, and I saw her jaw clench in frustration. What now? I asked. Victoria wants to know if there's going to be drama about this, Jessica said, reading from her screen. She says if you're going to make this into a big thing, maybe she should just uninvite me to avoid the conflict. Perfect. So now I was being painted as the villain for not wanting my fiancé to go on a romantic weekend with another man. Victoria was already positioning herself as the reasonable one who was just trying to help Jessica have fun, while I was the controlling fiancé who was ruining everything with my unreasonable jealousy. Tell her that my discomfort with my fiancé going to Aspen with her male friend isn't drama, I said. It's a completely reasonable boundary. Jessica spent the next few minutes typing frantically on her phone, clearly getting coaching from Victoria on how to handle this situation. After some back and forth texting, Jessica announced that Victoria wanted to FaceTime with us to clear the air and resolve this misunderstanding. Before I could object or suggest that this was between Jessica and me, there was Victoria on Jessica's phone screen. She had that fake smile and condescending energy that I'd learned to associate with trouble. Victoria always managed to make herself sound like the most reasonable person in the room while manipulating situations to get exactly what she wanted. The conversation went exactly as predictably as you'd expect it to go. Victoria gave me the whole "Derek is like family to all of us" routine, emphasizing how long they'd all known each other and how innocent their friendship was. She kept calling me insecure for having a problem with this completely normal friend trip, making it sound like my concerns were evidence of some deep personal flaw. I tried explaining that siblings don't usually book romantic resort weekends together, but Victoria just laughed it off like I was being ridiculous. The whole time this conversation was happening, Jessica was nodding along with everything Victoria said, as if Victoria was making perfect sense instead of defending the guy she was supposedly planning to marry. The kicker came when Victoria mentioned how excited Derek was to catch up with Jessica one-on-one. "They have so much history to talk about," she said, with a knowing smile that made my stomach turn. Yeah, I bet they had history to talk about. That phrase, "history to talk about," seemed loaded with implications that made me even more uncomfortable with this whole arrangement. I paid the check while Jessica continued texting, probably getting more pep talks from Victoria about how unreasonable I was being and how she shouldn't have to tolerate this kind of controlling behavior from her fiancé. We left the restaurant in complete silence. The entire ride home, Jessica was texting furiously, no doubt receiving emotional support and validation from Victoria about what a terrible, insecure boyfriend I was being. "So, what's it going to be?" she asked as I pulled into our driveway. "Are you going to trust me? Or are you going to be the jealous fiancé who ruins everything?" The way she framed the question made it clear that she'd already decided I was the problem. There was no acknowledgement that my concerns might be legitimate, no willingness to compromise or find a solution that worked for both of us. "I'm going to be the guy who doesn't pretend this situation is normal," I said. "If you want to go to Aspen with Derek, go ahead. But don't expect me to pretend it's okay." She slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the windows, and I knew we'd crossed a point of no return. That night, she slept on the couch, and the next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment and a missing suitcase. She was already gone when I woke up. Her weekend bag was missing from our closet, the good luggage we'd bought together for our trip to Europe last year. Even more telling, her gym bag was gone too, which struck me as odd since she never worked out on Fridays. Unless, of course, she was planning to work out with Derek at his fancy CrossFit gym near Aspen. I went through the motions of making coffee and getting dressed for work, trying to focus on what was literally the most important day of my career so far. This was the culmination of 6 months of intensive research and development, with a potential promotion hanging in the balance. I should have been completely focused on my presentation, but I kept finding myself staring at that empty space in our closet where her suitcase usually sat. Then, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification, and my stomach dropped when I saw what Jessica had posted. There she was in the airport, wearing sunglasses and holding an overpriced coffee, with that huge, genuine smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in weeks. She was wearing one of those expensive new workout sets, the ones I'd been paying for with my credit card, and she looked genuinely happy for the first time in months. But it was the caption that hit me like a punch to the gut. Some people call it running away. I call it running toward happiness. No apologies. Live your truth. Sometimes people show their true colors. The comment section was already exploding with responses. "Yes, Queen, live your best life," wrote one of her coworkers. "Some men just can't handle a strong woman," added another. "Toxic masculinity is so last season," commented someone I didn't even recognize. And there, right at the top of the comments, was Victoria with her predictable response. "So proud of you for choosing yourself. Real friends support your growth." Derek had liked the post. Of course he had. But what really got to me was seeing our mutual friends, people who knew both of us, who had been to our house for dinner parties, who knew the whole story of our relationship, cheering her on for publicly humiliating me. They were acting like she was some brave hero for standing up to her controlling fiancé, rather than a woman who was going on a romantic weekend with another man after her partner expressed reasonable concerns. That's when something inside me just snapped. All those months of making excuses for her behavior, all those times I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid when my gut was screaming warnings at me, all the evidence I'd been ignoring, it all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. I'd been in this relationship alone for months. While I was thinking about marriage and houses and kids and building a future together, she was thinking about college glory days and whatever fantasy she'd constructed around Derek. I'd been planning our wedding while she was planning her escape route. I went to work on complete autopilot and absolutely killed my presentation. It turns out that when you're running on pure, righteous anger and clarity, you can accomplish almost anything. Every slide was perfect. Every answer was confident. Every detail was flawless. My boss pulled me aside afterward to tell me it was some of the best work I'd ever done. If he only knew that I'd been mentally planning my breakup strategy during the Q&A session. That evening, I called Kyle to fill him in on the latest developments. "Dude," he said before I could even start explaining what had happened. "I saw the Instagram post. What the hell was that about?" "Yeah, so that happened," I said. "She went to Aspen with Derek after I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, then decided to publicly humiliate me on social media for having boundaries." "Please tell me you're not going to just sit there and take this," Kyle said. "I'm not," I replied, "but I'm also not going to do anything stupid either." "Define stupid," he said. "Blow up her phone with angry texts, make a dramatic scene, post some passive-aggressive response on social media." "Okay, so what's the not stupid option?" "Wait for it," I said. I didn't waste any time second-guessing myself or overanalyzing the situation. I was completely done with analysis paralysis. First, I changed my Facebook relationship status from engaged to Jessica to single. I clicked save and watched as 3 years of our relationship officially disappeared from my public profile. Second, I called the wedding venue and canceled everything. Yes, we were going to lose most of the deposits we'd already put down. No, I didn't give a shit about the money at this point. The woman I was supposed to marry had just publicly humiliated me while running off with another man. Saving face was worth more than saving money. Third, I drafted the 30-day eviction notice. My lawyer had actually sent me a template months ago, just in case things ever went south. At the time, I thought my mom was being paranoid when she suggested I get legal advice about cohabitation rights. Turns out mom's paranoia was incredibly useful after all. Fourth, and this was the conversation I was dreading most, I called Jessica's parents. This was going to be brutal, but it needed to happen before Jessica had a chance to spin the narrative in her favor. Her parents were old-school Catholics, the kind of people who still believed in commitment, respect, and keeping your word when you make promises to someone. They had been genuinely excited about our wedding, had already bought their outfits, and had booked their flights to attend the ceremony. I explained everything to them in careful detail. The Derek situation, the Aspen trip, the public humiliation on social media. I kept it factual and avoided trash-talking their daughter, just laying out exactly what had happened and why I was ending the engagement. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted about 30 seconds, which felt like an eternity. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," her father finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She went away with another man after you specifically asked her not to?" "Yes, sir," I replied. "And then she mocked you publicly on social media for having reasonable standards and boundaries?" "Yes, sir. That's exactly what happened." Another long pause. "Son, I owe you an apology," he said. "We raised her better than this. This is not the behavior of a woman who's ready for marriage or capable of being a good wife." Her mother got on the phone after that, and I could hear that she was crying. She kept apologizing for her daughter's behavior and asking if there was anything they could do to fix the situation or change my mind. I told her the honest truth. Some things can't be fixed, only learned from. After that conversation, I turned off my phone and went for the longest run of my life. I needed to clear my head and process everything that had just happened. When I finally turned my phone back on that evening, it was like a small nuclear bomb had exploded in my notifications. 60 missed calls, over 300 text messages, Instagram DMs, Facebook messages, even LinkedIn messages from people I barely knew. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, why I'd changed my relationship status, and whether Jessica was okay. The messages from Jessica herself were a masterclass in emotional manipulation and damage control. "What the hell is wrong with you? Change it back right now," read the first one. "This isn't funny anymore. I'm in Aspen. You can't do this to me here. said another. Answer your damn phone. Everyone is asking what happened. You're embarrassing me, was followed by about 20 more increasingly frantic messages. But the best message came from Victoria, who clearly thought she could intimidate me into backing down. Jessica is having a panic attack. Whatever game you're playing, it's not cute. She's supposed to be having fun, and you're ruining it with your jealousy. Grow up. A panic attack at the romantic wine country resort while she was supposed to be having innocent fun with her brother-like friend Derek. The irony was absolutely perfect. I took a screenshot of Victoria's message for posterity, then deleted the entire thread without responding to a single message. Sunday evening arrived, and I was meal prepping in my kitchen, enjoying the first genuinely peaceful silence I'd experienced in months. There were no group chat notifications buzzing constantly, no dramatic phone calls from Victoria, no tension hanging in the air. Just quiet, blessed normalcy. That's when my phone buzzed with an unexpected message from Nicole, a girl from my gym. We'd had maybe a dozen conversations over the past year. Casual stuff while waiting for equipment, small talk about workout routines, friendly chatter about nothing particularly important. She was definitely cute and seemed smart from our brief interactions. She had hinted sometimes about being single and had mentioned being interested in getting coffee, but I'd never pursued anything because, well, I was engaged. Hey, I saw on Facebook that you're single now, her message read. I hope everything's okay. If you ever want to grab coffee and talk or just hang out with someone who won't ask a million questions, let me know. No pressure at all. I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes, processing what it meant. Here was an attractive, seemingly normal woman reaching out to me with genuine kindness during what was obviously a difficult time. No drama, no manipulation, no hidden agendas, just a straightforward offer of companionship. That's really thoughtful of you, I wrote back. Are you free Tuesday evening? Absolutely, she responded almost immediately. There's this new Thai place on Ocean Drive I've been wanting to try. 7 work for you? Perfect, I replied. So while Jessica was presumably trying to salvage her weekend getaway and explain to Derek and Victoria why her fiancé had suddenly gone nuclear on social media, I was setting up my first date in 3 years. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. When it finally arrived, I was nervous as hell. I'd completely forgotten how to do this. How to talk to women outside the safety of a committed relationship. How to present myself as an available person rather than half of a couple. All my worrying turned out to be completely unnecessary. Nicole showed up looking effortlessly beautiful. Not Instagram filtered, not trying too hard with excessive makeup or overly revealing clothes. Just naturally pretty and well-fitting jeans and a sweater that actually looked like it belonged on her body rather than being chosen for maximum social media impact. We talked for 3 straight hours about work, books, travel plans, and completely random topics that made us both laugh. She asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. When I told stories about my work or my interests, she responded with her own related experiences instead of immediately steering everything back to herself and her problems. Most remarkably, she didn't check her phone once during our entire dinner. Not once in 3 hours. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone's complete, undivided attention during a conversation. So, she said over dessert, are you going to tell me what happened with your relationship? Or should I just assume you finally snapped and buried someone in your backyard? I laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Nothing that dramatic. I just realized I was in a relationship with someone who didn't actually want to be in a relationship with me. Ah, she said, nodding with understanding. The old, I love you, but I'm not in love with you situation? More like the I love you, but I love the attention from other guys more situation, I replied. She winced sympathetically. Ouch, that's actually worse. Yeah, well, live and learn, right? Her loss, she said simply. And somehow it sounded like she genuinely meant it rather than just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. Around 9 p.m., my phone started buzzing with incoming calls from Jessica. I glanced at the caller ID, calmly declined the call, and put the phone face down on the table. Everything okay? Nicole asked. Yep, everything's perfect, I said, and meant every word. We ended up at this 24-hour diner afterward, sharing chocolate cake and talking until midnight about everything and nothing. When we finally walked to our cars, she said, I had a really great time tonight. I hope we can do this again soon. Definitely, I said, and meant every word. When I pulled into my driveway around 12:30 a.m., Jessica's car was sitting there waiting for me. She was sitting on the porch steps in what could only be described as full raccoon breakdown mode. Mascara streaked down her face, hair a complete mess, still wearing those expensive workout clothes that now looked wrinkled and slept in. "You haven't talked to me in 4 days," she said as soon as I got out of my car, her voice hoarse from crying. "You went to Aspen with Derek after I specifically told you I wasn't comfortable with it," I replied, walking past her to unlock my front door. "And you didn't come back because you missed me. You came back because I embarrassed you by having self-respect." She followed me inside, switching tactics in real time from playing the victim to getting angry and demanding answers. "Where have you been tonight? Who were you with?" she demanded, launching into the usual interrogation you'd expect from someone who had just spent the weekend with another guy. "Doesn't matter," I replied calmly. "We're not together anymore." That's when the reality of the situation finally hit her. She launched into the whole, "We live together. We have a life together. You can't just throw away 3 years speech that I'd been expecting." But I cut her short by pulling out the formal eviction notice I'd prepared. "Here," I said, handing her the document. "You have 30 days to find a new place." "What the hell? Are you kidding me right now?" she said, staring at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "You can't just kick me out like some random roommate." Then came the moment I'd been dreading but knew was necessary. I asked for the engagement ring back. $6,500 isn't exactly pocket change, and I wasn't about to let her keep it as some kind of breakup trophy. That ring represented a future we were no longer going to have, and I'd be damned if I was going to let her walk away with it. She went through the entire cycle of emotions: disbelief, anger, bargaining, and finally sobbing. She twisted the ring off her finger and literally hurled it at my face, calling it cheap and worthless. This was the same ring she'd been posting Instagram photos of for 8 months, calling it her dream ring and showing it off to anyone who would look. That's when she completely lost it. She threw herself dramatically onto the couch and started sobbing like someone had died. She was hyperventilating between screams about how I was ruining her life and destroying everything she'd worked for. "This isn't happening," she kept repeating over and over. "This isn't real. You can't do this to me." "I can and I am," I said simply. While she was having her complete meltdown on my couch, I called Kyle. "Yo, brother. Wanna crash at my place for a while? I could use some backup and moral support." He showed up an hour later with a duffel bag and a shit-eating grin on his face. "This is going to be fun," he said, taking one look at Jessica still sobbing dramatically on the couch. And it was fun, in a petty but satisfying way. Kyle had this incredible gift for being subtly antagonistic in the most hilarious ways possible. He'd use the coffee maker at 6 a.m. every morning, grinding the beans as loudly as possible. He'd watch action movies with the volume turned just slightly too loud for comfort. He'd cook elaborate, amazing-smelling meals in the kitchen, then not offer Jessica any food. "Oh, sorry, Jessica," he'd say with perfectly fake concern. "I only made enough for people who actually live here." The best part was how he'd answer his phone calls right in the living room, talking loudly about his dating life for Jessica's benefit. "Yeah, bro, you need to find yourself a girl who actually respects boundaries," he'd say. "These toxic chicks who play games are a total waste of time and energy. Life's too short to deal with crazy." Jessica would stomp around the apartment, slamming doors and muttering under her breath. But Kyle would just smile and keep talking about how much better life was when you surrounded yourself with people who had their priorities straight. The real entertainment came the next day when Victoria showed up at my apartment like she owned the place. I was in my home office catching up on work when I heard the doorbell ring. Kyle answered it, and I could hear the conversation from down the hall. "Oh, you must be Victoria," I heard Kyle say in his most sarcastic voice. "The puppet master herself." "Excuse me?" Victoria replied, clearly taken aback by his directness. "Nothing. Blake's in his office down the hall." Victoria strutted into my office with all the fake confidence and attitude I'd come to expect from her. She positioned herself like she was about to conduct some kind of intervention or negotiation session. "We need to talk," she announced, as if I had been waiting for her arrival. "No, we don't," I replied, without looking up from my laptop. "This whole thing is completely ridiculous. You're being totally unreasonable about everything." I finally looked up from my work. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you to have an opinion about my relationship? I'm Jessica's best friend, and what you're doing to her is cruel and vindictive. What I'm doing is having self-respect. You should try it sometime." She planted herself in the chair across from my desk like she was settling in for some kind of lengthy negotiation. "Look, Blake, I get that you're upset about the Aspen thing, but you're completely overreacting to an innocent situation." "Sure, it was innocent," I said. She tried to convince me for another few minutes that I was being unreasonable, and that Jessica's weekend getaway was completely harmless. When she realized that I wasn't going to budge or change my mind, she switched tactics entirely. Fine, but you can't just kick Jessica out of her home. She has rights as someone who's been living here. She has 30 days, which is exactly what the law requires, I replied. This is her home too. This is my apartment that I graciously allowed her to live in. That arrangement is ending. You're being a vindictive asshole about this whole situation. That's when Kyle appeared in the doorway. Even though he's not a particularly big guy, there's something about his energy and presence that makes people back down when he's serious. Hey, Victoria, I think it's time for you to leave, he said firmly. I'm not done talking, she protested. Yes, you are. Kyle stepped into the room, and his tone made it clear that this wasn't a suggestion. You orchestrated this whole shit show. You got your friend to humiliate my boy publicly? And now you want to come into his house and make demands? Nah. You can't kick me out, Victoria said, trying to maintain some dignity. Watch me. Kyle grabbed her purse from where she'd set it down and handed it to her. Door's that way. Use it. Don't think this is over, she said, trying to sound threatening as Kyle escorted her toward the exit. Yeah, it is, I called after her. And tell Jessica that her emotional support manipulator isn't welcome here anymore. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. Jessica had spent the night crafting her revenge narrative and posting it everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, probably LinkedIn for all I knew. The post was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation and victim playing. After 3 years together, my fiancé decided to end our relationship via Facebook status change while I was visiting friends. Then he served me with eviction papers like I'm some random roommate instead of the woman who's been building a life with him. I guess I dodged a bullet, but it still hurts to see someone you love become someone you don't recognize. Toxic masculinity. Manipulative partners. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Her friends were rallying around her with support. Strangers were offering sympathy and advice, and my character was getting completely assassinated by people who had never met me and didn't know the first thing about our relationship. But while Jessica was busy playing the victim on social media and trying to control the narrative, I was quietly documenting everything. I took screenshots of her posts, saved copies of our text conversations, and photographed the damage she was causing to the apartment. My lawyer had warned me to expect retaliation and to keep detailed records of everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica launched a campaign that would make political operatives proud. She started accidentally breaking things around the apartment. My favorite coffee mug, a picture frame that had sentimental value, the good blender I'd bought for making protein shakes. These were all small items that could be explained away as stress-related accidents or clumsiness. She also started bringing friends over at all hours of the day and night, claiming she needed emotional support during this difficult time. They'd be loud until 2 a.m., leave messes in the kitchen and living room, and basically do everything possible to make my life miserable. The whole strategy was designed to make living in my own apartment so unpleasant that I'd either take her back or agree to let her stay longer than the legal 30 days. But the real escalation came when Jessica found out about Nicole. I'd been seeing her regularly since that first dinner. Nothing too serious yet, just casual dinners and coffee dates while I figured out my life and processed everything that had happened. Nicole was incredibly patient and understanding about my situation, and refreshingly normal after months of dealing with Jessica's emotional chaos and manipulation. Somehow, Jessica found out about my dating life, though I'm still not entirely sure how. I'd been discreet about it, but in a city this size, word travels fast, especially when people are looking for gossip. Thursday evening, I came home from work to find Jessica sitting in the living room with a nearly empty bottle of wine and what could only be described as a psychotic expression on her face. She'd clearly been drinking and working herself up into a rage while waiting for me to get home. So, she said without any preamble, you're already screwing someone else. I'm dating someone, yes, I replied calmly. Dating as in getting to know someone new. She let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark than anything resembling actual amusement. How long has this been going on? How is that any of your business? I asked. How long have you been cheating on me? She demanded, her voice getting louder and more aggressive. I haven't cheated on anyone, I replied firmly. We broke up. I'm single. I can see whoever I want. That's when she completely lost whatever remaining control she'd been holding on to. She threw her wine glass first, missing me by only a few inches before it shattered against the wall behind me. Then she went for the TV remote, hurling it directly at my head. You freaking bastard! She screamed, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. You had this all planned out. You already had her lined up before you even broke up with me. I planned not to let you walk all over me anymore, I replied, dodging a flying coaster that she'd grabbed from the coffee table. That's all I planned. She's nothing, Jessica was ranting now, looking around for more ammunition to throw. Some gym bimbo who doesn't even know who you really are. She knows how to respect boundaries, I said. That already puts her miles ahead of you. That's when Jessica grabbed the TV remote and hurled it directly at my 65-inch flat-screen television. The remote hit dead center, and the screen immediately spiderwebbed with cracks before going completely black. My TV, the one I'd saved up for months to buy, the one I'd researched extensively and been so proud of, was completely destroyed. Something inside me snapped when I saw my television destroyed. That wasn't just property damage, it was a deliberate, vindictive attack designed to hurt me financially and emotionally. You're done, I said, pulling out my phone and starting to dial. What? She said, suddenly realizing that she might have gone too far. Pack whatever you can carry and leave tonight, I said firmly. You can't kick me out early. I have rights, she protested. You just destroyed my property. I'm calling the cops. She stared at me for a moment, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing or if I was actually serious about involving law enforcement. I wasn't bluffing. Wait, she said, panic finally creeping into her voice. Wait, I'm sorry, I'll pay for it. I'll replace the TV. Too late for apologies, I said. Kyle, I called. Help her pack. Get her the hell out of here tonight. Kyle stepped forward from where he'd been watching the whole scene unfold. Come on, Jessica, let's get your stuff together. I'm not going anywhere, she said, trying to push past Kyle toward the stairs. Yeah, you are, Kyle said firmly, catching her wrists before she could get past him. The adult conversation portion of this evening is officially over. She struggled against Kyle's grip for a few seconds, then started crying. Genuine panic crying this time. Not the manipulative tears she'd been using for weeks. Please, she sobbed. I have nowhere to go tonight. Should have thought of that before you destroyed my TV, I replied. Kyle helped her pack 2 suitcases while she alternated between crying and threatening to call her lawyer. I documented everything with my phone. The broken TV, her threats, her refusal to leave voluntarily, Kyle having to physically escort her out. You're making a huge mistake, she said as Kyle walked her out with her bags. You'll regret this decision. That bitch will never be better than me, she continued. No one will ever love you the way I did. Sure thing, I replied. I slept more peacefully that night than I had in months. Throughout the next week, Jessica was absolutely spamming social media with pictures of herself and Derek, posting them everywhere with captions like, "Know your real people," and "Sometimes you lose something to get something better." Victoria, of course, was hyping them up in the comments with responses like "Slay Queen" and "I'm so proud of you, bitch." I just blocked them all and moved on with my life. I had much more important things to focus on than whatever narrative they were trying to create for their social media followers. But the universe wasn't done delivering justice yet. One afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was professional, but clearly strained. Is this Blake? The woman asked. Yes, this is Blake. This is Chloe from Bennett's Associates. I think we need to talk about Victoria Morrison. Bennett's Associates, that was Victoria's company. And Chloe, as it turned out, was Victoria's direct supervisor. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Chloe was sharp, direct, and clearly not someone who tolerated nonsense in her professional environment. I'll cut straight to the chase, she said, after we'd ordered our drinks. Victoria has been using company resources for personal trips and activities. She explained that Victoria had been booking hotels on the corporate account and using her company credit card for personal expenses. The Aspen trip, among several others, had all been charged to the company under the guise of business expenses. She claimed these were business retreats and team-building exercises, Chloe continued. But when we looked into the details, Chloe slid a folder across the table to me. The only employees attending these supposed business retreats were Victoria and 2 external friends who don't work for our company. The folder contained receipts, email chains, and screenshots of the group chat where Victoria had been coordinating everything. It was all there in black and white. The lies about business purposes, the personal use of company funds, and the complete disregard for corporate policy. How did you find out about all this? I asked. Chloe smiled grimly. Anonymous tip. Someone sent us very detailed information about Victoria's activities, including dates, expenses, and evidence that these weren't business-related trips. They also mentioned that you might have some additional information that could help our investigation. I had a pretty good idea who might have sent that anonymous tip. Kyle had been suspiciously smug lately whenever I mentioned Victoria, and he worked in construction management with connections throughout the business community. What happens to Victoria now? I asked. Victoria is being terminated immediately for fraud and misuse of company resources, Chloe replied. We're also pursuing legal action to recover all the misappropriated funds. But the karma train was just getting started. The next piece of cosmic justice came from an unexpected source, Derek himself. According to mutual friends who were suddenly very willing to share gossip now that the drama had exploded publicly, whatever had happened in Aspen hadn't gone according to Jessica's plan at all. Apparently, Derek had brought a surprise guest to the resort, his girlfriend Amanda, who he'd been dating for 3 months. The romantic reunion that Victoria had orchestrated turned into an incredibly awkward weekend where Jessica played third wheel while Derek focused entirely on his actual girlfriend. The college fantasy that Jessica had built up in her head crashed directly into reality, and reality won decisively. But the absolute best part was yet to come. Remember that group chat where they had all been planning behind my back and making jokes about my reactions to their schemes? Amanda had been added to that chat too when she joined the Aspen trip. And Amanda, being a normal human being with functional boundaries and basic decency, took screenshots of everything and sent them to Derek's ex-girlfriend Sophia. Sophia had been wondering why Derek had suddenly become distant and weird in their relationship. Now she had her answer. Sophia worked at the same PR firm as Jessica, and she had very strong opinions about women who interfered in other people's relationships. Monday morning, Jessica walked into her office to find HR waiting for her with a very serious expression. Someone had sent them evidence that Jessica had been having inappropriate communications with clients' business partners during company time. Derek worked for one of their major client companies, and using company resources to coordinate personal affairs was a serious violation of policy. The company took a very dim view of employees whose personal drama interfered with client relationships and professional responsibilities. Kyle filled me in on all the juicy details over drinks that Friday evening. We were at our usual spot, and he had that satisfied grin that told me the news was going to be good. So let me get this straight, I said, trying to process everything he'd just told me. Victoria got fired for fraud. Derek got dumped by his girlfriend, and Jessica got suspended from work. Jessica didn't just get suspended, Kyle said, with an even bigger grin spreading across his face. She got fired outright. No way, I said. Her supervisor had been looking for a reason to get rid of her anyway, Kyle explained. Apparently, she'd been having attitude problems and missing deadlines for months. The relationship drama was just the excuse they needed to finally pull the trigger. How do you know all these details? I asked. My buddy works in their HR department, Kyle replied. The whole thing was apparently a complete shit show. Jessica tried to claim discrimination and unfair treatment, but when they showed her the screenshots of her own messages and the evidence of her unprofessional behavior, Kyle shook his head with amusement. She walked out crying and making threats about lawsuits that everyone knew she couldn't afford. Meanwhile, my own life was going better than it had in years. The promotion I'd been working toward came through with a significant salary increase that made all the financial hits from the breakup seem insignificant. Nicole and I were taking things slow but steady, building something real without any of the drama or manipulation I'd become accustomed to. She was everything Jessica wasn't: honest, supportive, genuinely respectful of boundaries. She was interested in building something meaningful instead of chasing drama for entertainment, or trying to recreate some idealized version of her past. The apartment felt peaceful again for the first time in months. I'd repaired all the damage Jessica had caused, upgraded the security system, and created a space that actually felt like home instead of a war zone where I had to constantly be on guard. Then the universe decided it had one final act of poetic justice in store for me. Exactly 3 months after the Facebook status change that had started this entire chain of events, I got a text message from Jessica. Can we please talk? I know I messed up. I miss you. I miss us. I showed Kyle the message when he came over later that evening. You going to respond to this? He asked. Yeah, but not how she's expecting, I replied. What's the plan? Kyle asked with interest. I grinned. Let me tell you exactly what I'm thinking. I texted Jessica back. Mel's Diner on Ocean Drive. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. You get 30 minutes. The next evening, I showed up 15 minutes early and grabbed a booth in the back section of the restaurant. Kyle arrived about 10 minutes later and sat across the room with his phone ready to document whatever was about to happen. Jessica walked in at exactly 7 p.m. looking like she'd spent the entire day preparing for this moment. Her hair was perfectly done, her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing that dress I used to love seeing her in. She was clearly pulling out all the stops for one last manipulation attempt. She slid into the booth across from me with hands that were shaking slightly, looking like she'd spent hours mentally rehearsing this conversation and preparing for this moment. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," she said, in that small, vulnerable voice that I used to fall for completely. For the next 20 minutes, she delivered the full manipulation playbook. She talked about being sorry, going to therapy, personal growth, and self-reflection. She explained how Derek had just been a scared attempt to avoid the commitment of marriage, and how she'd learned and grown from the experience. She even reached across the table to grab my hand, while explaining how she'd learned that I was what she really wanted all along. Apparently, the Derek situation had been a complete disaster. His actual girlfriend had found out about Jessica's involvement and realized that Derek had been lying to both of them about the nature of their relationship. Sound familiar? Karma really is a beautiful thing. "I know I don't deserve another chance," she said, tears flowing right on cue. "But what we had was real. We built something meaningful together." "You're absolutely right," I said quietly. Her whole face lit up with hope and relief. "Really?" I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and placed a $10 bill on the table for my coffee. "Thanks for the show," I said. "But the answer is no. I'm not taking you back. Not now, not ever. Not if you were the last woman on Earth." That's when she completely snapped and showed her true colors. "Screw you!" she screamed, standing up so fast that she knocked over her water glass, sending water cascading across the table. "You think you're so perfect? You're nothing. You're boring and safe and predictable. And you'll never find anyone better than me," she continued, her voice cracking with a mixture of rage and desperation. The entire diner went completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to someone's mouth, and everyone was staring at our table watching this complete meltdown unfold. "I gave you the best years of my life," she continued, her voice getting louder and more unhinged. "And you threw it all away over one mistake, one stupid weekend." "Ma'am," said the restaurant manager, appearing at our table with a concerned expression, "I need you to lower your voice or I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "This is between me and him," Jessica said, gesturing wildly between us. "Not anymore," the manager replied firmly. "You're disturbing other customers. Time to go." "You can't kick me out," she protested. "Security," the manager called toward the front of the restaurant. Two guys who looked like they could have played linebacker in college started moving purposefully toward our table. "Fine, fine," Jessica said, grabbing her purse with shaking hands and storming toward the exit. But she turned back one last time for a final dramatic statement. "You'll regret this decision. When you're old and alone, you'll remember what you gave up." "All right, Pocahontas," I replied calmly. She flipped me off and stormed out of the restaurant with half the diner still watching in shocked silence. I sat back down and calmly finished my coffee, making sure to leave a generous tip for our waitress who had witnessed that spectacular display of emotional instability. Kyle came over to my table, grinning like the Cheshire Cat and holding up his phone. "Dude," he said, "I got the whole thing on video. The boys at work are going to absolutely love this." We walked out to the parking lot where I could see Jessica sitting in her car, probably crying and figuring out how to spin this encounter into another victim narrative for her social media followers. As I walked to my own car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete and total peace. The woman who had made me question my own sanity and second-guess my instincts was finally facing the consequences of her choices and behavior. The last I heard through the grapevine, Jessica's entire friend group had imploded after all the drama came to light. Victoria had completely ghosted her, blaming Jessica for everything that had gone wrong and refusing to take any responsibility for her own role in orchestrating the whole mess. Derek was nowhere to be found, having disappeared back into his own life with his actual girlfriend. And Jessica? Well, she's broke, unemployed, and facing the reality that actions have consequences. As for me, I'm doing great. Better than great, actually. I've got a career that's thriving, a relationship with someone who actually respects me and our boundaries, and most importantly, I've got my self-respect back. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone show you exactly who they really are before you make the biggest mistake of your life. Jessica did me a favor by revealing her true character before we got married. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long to recognize the pattern and trust my own instincts. The moral of the story? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And when your gut is telling you something is wrong, don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or insecure. Sometimes what people call paranoia is just your brain recognizing patterns that your heart doesn't want to accept. I dodged a major bullet, and now I'm living my best life with someone who actually wants to be with me. Life has a funny way of working out exactly the way it's supposed to.